In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to complete one of the exercises in our digital textbook, and that is to create a project site boundary and clip and reproject our data to match that project site boundary. So I've already created my project site boundary. I have both a feature and I have a graphic area of interest, and the thing I'm probably going to clip down first is going to be my aerial photography. So the first thing I need to do is select my graphic area of interest. Turn my select tool on here. I believe I have another graphic area of interest. So let me click off of that and then click on this. So if you have two graphic area of interest, you're going to have to be a little bit careful and make sure that you just have the one in here selected. Now I'm going to go over here. I need to locate my aerial photography. It's already turned on. So I'll just go ahead and right click on that and go to Data and Export Data. So I have the correct thing selected here. It says Selected Graphic Clipping. I want the spatial projection to actually match my data frame. So now it's going to convert that from meters to feet. And I want it to save into my geodatabase, so this is the correct location for that. And over here where it says name, I'm probably going to name it just aerial to keep it simple. I don't need to do any more with it after this step, simply because there is no elevation data. So I'll just go ahead and click Save. It's asking me if I want to add this to my data frame as a layer. Yes, I do. I can turn off my aerial now, and I should just have my Marlett Park aerial site clipped down. I'm going to go ahead and drag that into my inventory area, probably underneath my area of interest. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn my aerial photography off. The next thing I need to clip now is my terrain data. Now I have a couple of pieces of terrain here. I could probably do the original data set, and if I do that, I'll have to also convert the elevation information, but as it turns out, I already have one in here where the elevation information has been converted to feet, and this is my general kind of area of interest terrain XYZ feet. So that's the one that I'm going to actually use to build this Marlett Park boundary. So I already have the boundary selected. I'm going to right click on this dataset layer and go to Data and choose Export Data. So again, I want the selected graphic. Over here, I don't need to choose data frame. It's already correctly spatially projected for me. Very, very convenient. And down here where it says name, maybe I'll name it something a little bit more simpler. I'll call it terrain, and then click Save. It's already going to my Marlett Park database, by the way. Go ahead and click Yes. So I'll go ahead and turn off the other one. And now I have the nicely clipped one here. So now I have one more piece of data that I want to clip, and that one is my soils. So again, I'm going to have to go up here to my vector-based tools and go into my clip. And again, I could do the very large one, but I don't want to do that. I want to use the one that's already clipped because it's already projected for me. So let me turn that one off. Drag my terrain back into here. Turn on my soils. Drag and drop that inside of here. Again, I want to mention that you're not going to have to reproject this because we already did it in a previous step. We're just simply clipping here. So I need to add my clip feature, and that's that one that we just digitized. That's this one here. And now my output, so it's already going to the geodatabase. I'm just going to name it something else. Probably just call it soils. XY tolerance, I'm not going to add anything in here. Just going to leave this at default. From here, I'll just go ahead and click OK and see what I get. So in order to see it, I'm probably going to need to turn some layers off here, like this one. And I probably need to turn the big soils off. There we go. Now we just have the littler one. And as you can see, this is a lot more manageable. So if I right click on this and go to Open Attribute Table, you can see that now the number of soils that I'm having to work with is only 9 compared to, say, the big soils. Let's look at the big soils. which is quite a few here in this list. See, it goes down to like 10,000. Quite a large list. So this works out pretty good for us. So the next thing that might be really helpful for us is if we could organize our data frame a little bit better. So I'm just going to collapse all of these just simply so that it's a little bit more smaller. So right now I'm going to add some more group layers. We have our soils data. And I'm going to drag and drop all of my soils data inside of soils. Going to do another group layer here. I'm going to call this topography. This is where we're going to store all of our topographic information. So that's all of this stuff right here. Oh, doesn't include aerial. See if I can drag all of this at once. Oh, very good. And then we have our area of interest. I'm just going to collapse that. Maybe I'm going to turn that off. Why not, right? Here I'm going to go to properties. Let's do our aerial. And oftentimes it's not called aerial. Sometimes we'll call this land use, land coverage. I mean, that's really what an aerial tells us. And then I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop my aerial inside of there. And usually what I do with my area of interest is I kind of keep that towards the top, like way up there at the top. This one is kind of a general area of interest, and I might keep that within my inventory because it's mostly for inventory purposes. But this other area of interest is kind of important. We're going to use it quite often. It's probably going to be pretty handy for us to have it up towards the top. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things on and off just for fun here, just to see what we got. I'm not going to turn the top one on. So from here I'm going to go ahead and save so I don't lose anything. Remember, I'm going to version save. So I'm just going to put a little 2 here because we're still formatting base data. And remember, when you're saving, you probably want to turn everything off so that way if you have to reload, you don't have to refresh or redraw all of those maps. So at this point in time, what we've done is created our base data. It's really nothing special. It's just for us to see, what the existing data is. It may be that you need to actually create some maps from this and take it with you on a site visit or something. So I'm going to cover a little bit on how to make some maps. So over here where it says soils, I'm going to go ahead and check that in. And right now this is pretty useless to us because we don't really know what's what here. So I'm going to change that symbology. I'm going to right click and go to properties. I'm going to go to the symbology tab and choose categories, unique values. I'm going to choose the mu name. Choose add all values. And maybe I'll choose something that stands out a little bit more. There's other things to pick from here. Personally, I like this one, but I know that certain faculty members don't. So that's pretty good there. Let's go ahead and turn off soils and take a look at our topography. So in my opinion, this topography looks a little bit flat. There is something that you can do to make this look a little bit more 3D-ish, and that is to create a hillshade. So I can go down here to the Spatial Analyst tools, look for my surface tools, and look for something called hillshade. If I double click on that, it's going to ask me for an input raster, so I'm just going to drag and drop my terrain into there. And then an output, it's already going into the Geo database. Let me just name it hillshade, which is something that makes more sense. Azimuth, I'm going to leave it default. Altitude, I'll leave it default. I do want it to model my shadows so that it looks a little bit more 3D-ish. Again, we're not going to use this layer really for analysis. We're going to be using this hillshade to basically make our maps look better. So from here, I'll go ahead and click OK. And let that process out. And we can't see it because it's sitting underneath everything. So let me drag and drop it on top of terrain over here. And we can immediately see that it looks a little bit more 3D-ish. But now we can't see the thing that's underneath. So let me right click on Hillshade and go to Properties. We can actually set the transparency. So let me try 50% transparency. And I'm doing that within the Display tab, by the way. Go ahead and click Apply and click OK. And that definitely gives it a little bit more 3D feel to it, makes it definitely pop out. So I'm good with topography now. So I'll go ahead and uncheck that. Let's take a look at my aerial. Looks like my aerial is as good as it's going to be, so that one is good as well. Now in order for me to make some maps, I'm actually in Data View. I need to go to Layout View. So down here at the bottom I've got a couple of buttons here. I'm going to choose the second one, which is actually going to be my Layout View. So sometimes if you roll your mouse over the button, it'll tell you if it's Data or Layout View. So I want to go into Layout View. And there's a couple of ways that I can create this layout. The first way, of course, is to manually create it, and the second way is to kind of borrow from an existing map. I'm actually quite a lazy person, so I'm going to borrow from an existing map. So I'm going to go to my Layout toolbar here, and I'm going to choose this Change Layout button over here. And I might scroll through and maybe grab some traditional layouts. Click through each of these and find something that comes close to what I want. That's pretty close, except I want it to be portrait. That's the one that I actually want. So I'll go ahead and click Finish. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can take a look at what I have here. So right now my kind of scale here is in feet. It's kind of a weird scaling, 1320. Which means that I'm probably going to need to zoom in my map a little bit more. And before I do that, I'm going to actually want to scoot some of this stuff up towards the top. So I'm pressing the Shift key and then just selectively selecting each of these, and I'm just going to drag it upwards to right here. It's not going to be my final resting place for it. I'm just moving it there just now to just get it out of the way. So now I'm going to use my regular bar here that I've been using for my data frame, and I just want to zoom in a little bit. I mean, that's close to what I want, but not exactly, and there's no way to really do a refine zoom out or zoom in or anything like that. So I'm going to kind of get it close to what I want, and then take a look at my legend here, my scale actually, and it says 1020, which is not exactly what I want. So I'm going to go up here and just kind of play with these numbers a little bit. So by changing this to 1700, it kind of gives me a little bit more cleaner scale down here at the bottom. So now I'm just going to basically position this where I want it. I want to be careful not to zoom in or zoom out. And it may be that I need to click my data frame and resize it a little bit as well. Actually, where it's at works okay. One thing that I would really like to do though is kind of get rid of this little bar that's around here, this black square. Some people kind of like that thing, some people don't. So I'm going to right click on this and show you how to get rid of it in case you don't. So I just right clicked here and went to Properties. I'm going to go to Frame, and where it says Color, I'm going to choose No Color. So that way the frame kind of disappears. My title is running over the top of Marlett Park here, so let me move it towards the top here a little bit higher. And maybe it might be better if my legend was maybe in here somewhere. I could also move it back down here towards the bottom, so let's try that just for fun. So let me select everything again. Now that we have everything in position, and just move it down here towards the bottom. And right now it's just showing the color bands in my aerial here, and it has my area of interest. So I'm going to right click on this and go to Properties, and maybe I don't want my area of interest to appear in there. So over here it says Legend Items. Make sure that area of interest is selected, and then just move it back over to the left side so it's not going to appear. There's a bunch of other things here as well, and the reason why that's not appearing is simply because we don't have those layers turned on here in the map. So there we go. And then you probably want to give this a title, so maybe we'll call it Aerial Imagery Maybe we'll use this little text down here to give a little bit more detail. Marlett Park, Manhattan, Kansas. So you can certainly have a different hierarchy of text here. You can go back in here and you can change the font size, the character spacing, the angle. There's lots of things that you can do in format here. Very similar to Microsoft Word. You can also go to change symbology and choose some pre-formatted text here if you wanted to. But we'll just use the defaults. So once you're done getting this the way that you want it to be, you can go up here to File and Export Map. One thing I do want to mention is you probably want to add your name in here and all that other stuff that's probably important to have in a map. So I'm going to go back to Export Map, and I don't want it to export as an EMF. I'll probably want to export it as a JPEG. And notice the resolution down here. It's set to 96. If you export this map at a 96 resolution, it's going to be pretty pixelated. It's going to be hard to tell what's going on in there. So usually what I do, especially if you're going to print the map, in this case we won't actually print the map, but general rule of thumb is we go with 300. That's a pretty relatively decent resolution for anything that you plan to print. That's why we go with 300. And now I'm going to save this into my file management system. So I'm going to go into Marlett Park. I'm going to look for GIS, and I'm going to put it in my maps directory. You can create another directory and call it something else. For this demo, I'm just going to save it in the maps, and I probably want to give it a different name. I'm going to call it Aerial, and then click Save. So I'm going to go take a look at my aerial just to see what that looks like. Side of projects here. Just going to right click and choose preview. I'm going to take a look and see if it's badly pixelated. Actually, it looks pretty decent. Good enough to put into an InDesign document if needed. So let's go ahead and click exit to that. Now I want to make another map, so I'm going to turn off my aerial and turn on my topography. And the thing I probably want to change is the title of my map up here at the top, so I'll call it Topography. Another item that you probably want to include in your maps is a works cited, like where this data came from. Something else that should also likely be included. So I've changed the title. I'm going to go over here to File and Export Map again. But before I do that, I want to pay attention to my legend. I can see that I have some things in here like my hill shade, which probably doesn't need to be in there. It doesn't really tell us anything. Again, it was more for aesthetics. But having the high and low value of my terrain is probably going to be very useful. So from here I'll export my map. Again as another JPEG, and I'll just call it Terrain. And click Save. Take a look at what that looks like. Make sure it's not pixelated. That looks pretty good. So now I'll go back in here and I'll turn on my soils data. And I need to adjust my legend. So you can see it's running kind of over my soils over here. Maybe, whoops, didn't mean to move that. If you accidentally move something else, just type Control Z to undo. Mean to move this thing. So I'm just going to move it upwards here, since it's kind of running over my text. My soils map actually looks kind of cartoonish and a little bit flat, so another trick that I could do is I'm going to move my topography layer underneath my soils, turn off my terrain, turn on my hill shade, and what I might do, let me just try moving that on top of soils just to see what that looks like. There, that looks a little bit more interesting. Another thing that you could do is give your soils map the transparency. So maybe we'll make this one 50% transparent. And then move the topography underneath. Let's just see what that looks like. So there's another alternative way of making it look a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to change it back to the other way. The way that you choose to use is mostly personal preference, so it doesn't really matter as long as it reads well. So I'll leave it as this, and of course up here I need to change my title again. I'm going to call it Soils, and then from here I'll do another export map. Call this Soils as well, and then I'll just click Save. See what it looks like. Zoom in a little bit. It looks pretty clean. And this is pretty much all there is to this exercise, is to create these 3 maps here and then export them.